An example of C# objects, classes, and properties. Debug, start debugging. To go ahead and test our program, make sure everything is working okay. And it looks like it is, so we can get started. What we're going to do first is create a new class. And I'm going to create it inside of this namespace. So I'm going to collapse this. Well, first let me rename this one. I'm going to highlight, right click, and rename, also called refactor. And how about if I call it the driver class, and apply that. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and collapse this down. And now that I can see inside of my namespace, I've got this one class. I'm going to create another class outside of this, what was the program class, now called the driver class. And I'm going to create a class called rectangle. Okay. And put my curly braces in there. And I'm going to start off with a couple of variable names. I'm going to add to that a couple variables. And these are private, which means they can only be seen within this class called rectangle. To the driver class can't see these variables. Okay, so, and here I'm making a constructor for the class rectangle, and the constructor is just the entry point. Doesn't really construct anything. It's the starting point for this class that I've called rectangle. And inside of this constructor, I'm going to pass some values. I'm going to pass a double data type called L, comma, and a double data type called W. And these are going to stand for the length and width that I'm passing into this class. And so since I'm passing it into this class, I can assign it to the length, which I've declared here at the beginning of the program, and the width, and assign the okay. Okay, so when I create an object out of the rectangle class, it's going to start here first in my constructor. Whoops. It's going to start here first in my constructor, and it's going to pass in the value for L and the value for W. And then I'm going to assign those to the length and width. Okay, once I've done that, so I'm going to add a method to this rectangle class, and this method is just going to return the length times the width. So whatever I pass in, when this object is initialized, it's going to call this constructor. This constructor is going to initialize the value of length and width, and then this method is going to take those values and multiply them and return the result. Okay, that's pretty much it. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my driver class. Let me collapse this down and open up my driver class, and don't really need hello world in there. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create an object, a rectangle object. Rectangle, I'm going to call it R1, and I'm going to call that constructor rectangle, and that constructor, and it tells me here I need to pass in a double and then another double data type. Okay, so the first double data type I'm going to pass in is 4.2, 4.1, and 8.44. Okay, so now that I've done that, so I've created an object called R1 out of the rectangle class, and I've passed to the constructor some initial values. And now what I have access to, I'm going to type R1, and some R1 dot, and I have access to that get area method. Now there's also some methods that you automatically inherit every time from the object class, but those will always be there. But the one that is in the rectangle class that we're looking for is the get area method. You know, it's a method with this little box over here on the side. Alright, so I want that one. Get area, it's a method, so I want parentheses on there. And I do want to be able to print that out. So how about if I do this? How about if I say, and I'm going to say the area equals, and then I'm going to put a comma after this, and I've got that outside. That needs to be inside my Control X. I know. Need to move that on the inside. Whoops, too many. Okay, semicolon says that that's the end of this statement, so I want to make sure that I've got it in the right place. Okay, and that's it. I'm going to go ahead and run this. Debug, start debugging. Oops, forgot to put a placeholder in there. I need to put the placeholder in there and in front of the ending double quote. There we go. Now let's try it. Debug, start debugging. There we go. So so we created a second class inside of here. We have the driver class, and we created the rectangle class. We created an object out of that class, and we've shown that you have access to everything that's public that's within that class. Okay. Let's look at the keyword static. And I'm going to put another method in here, which is just a hello method. It's void, so it's not going to return anything like this one does. It's public, which means I have access to it from outside of this class. And the only thing it's going to do is just display a string of text. Rectangle. Okay, so that's the only thing it's going to do. The thing that's different about this is this keyword static. So let's take a look at how that works. I'm going to go back to my driver. Let me collapse this down, and I'm going to go back to my driver, and so we created an object out of rectangles, so now I have access to all of those methods which are in the rectangle class. I'm going to type R1 dot, and you notice I don't have access to that hello method that I just created. And the reason is because it's static. And so let me show you how you have access to it. The access to it is much more direct. I'm going to use the name of the class. The name of the class is called rectangle, and I'm not going to create an object. I'm just going to say rectangle dot, and there it is. And this dot operator that separates that allows me to have access to this hello method. Okay, so now when I run that, debug, start debugging, now I can access that method. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop there. So again, what I need to do is track this project down, and I'm using Windows, and I think it's Windows 10. So I'm going to use File Explorer to track this down. So I'm done with this. I can close this out. And I happen to have stored mine in Visual Studio under Projects, the Projects folder, and there it is. If I were to drill down in there, I would see that there's all of my files. And okay, so let me go back up to the top level, and I'm going to right click and send that to, and if compress zip folder, and if you don't have that, download 7-zip or one of the others. It's free, and then I can rename this and put my name and whatever module it is. Okay, and that's ready to go. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it there.